Okay, so if you're wondering what this is about the tariff hysteria that's in play right now and has been for the past few months, and to uncover what this, I guess, what sits behind it, and how sadly, even some of the minds that you'd imagine would be able to see it for what it is are starting to get sucked in. And so, yeah, anyone who's here to want to learn what the whole point of this is and how it's all orchestrated, maybe there's some value in it for you. So let's get started.
At the highest levels of all countries, they all belong to the same club. And we, the people, sit back and we watch this grand drama, which is being played out for our benefit, not theirs. If it wasn't for us, they wouldn't even have to do any of this. But you see, they just can't come out and destroy all of us because they need slaves. They need people to make their shoes and make their cars and mine the ore. They need worker bees, and that's what we are. In the New World Order, we will be the worker bees, the slaves. Most people are no better than animals who do not have intelligence because they don't use their intelligence. And to these men who control things behind the scenes, you are stakes on the table by choice and consent, and will always be ruled and manipulated and enslaved by people who do use their brains.
So there you have it. He's basically laying it out for you that the whole structure is built upon the structure that they've got in their minds about how consent is granted. And while you give into these structures by complying, collaborating, it doesn't matter that it's under fear or duress, you're still doing it. And if you're not calling out the truth as it actually operates in reality, like through your conscience, if you're doing anything other than that, you are giving consent. So if you're wondering who that was Bill Cooper. So he's someone who was very closely tied to that whole inner sanctum. So I'm just going to play a clip now that shows you how well connected he was. So where he gets his knowledge from comes from knowing it from within.
And every member of naval intelligence that I knew who was an officer was a 32nd or a 33rd degree Freemason. And I asked my commanding officer at one point, I said, why are all you guys Masons? He said, Masons are used to keeping secrets. It's part of their fraternity. So if you want someone who already knows how to keep a secret, you recruit Freemasons. Well, later on, I found out what the truth is. The truth is you're not going to be a naval intelligence officer unless you are a Freemason or a member of the Ancient Order of the Rose and Cross, but you have to be high degrees for that. I think the reason I was selected as a enlisted man is because I had belonged to the Demolition Society, which is why as a teenager. That's sort of the first level of Freemasonry. That's how they recruit teenagers and indoctrinate them into their principles so that they go right into Freemasonry when they become an adult.
So there you have it. He's telling you he was right on the inside of it, connected to, some high-level people that worked within it. So do your own research if you want to. I'm just giving you something to look at. Just going back to what he said about the people who run it, if you don't stand up as a living sentient being who activates their conscience and just accepts what you're told because you want to go along with the herd, you want to be safe and it's comfortable and you don't want to face the lies you tell yourself, well, this is the treatment you're going to keep making sure you're going to keep getting, and people that you say you love are going to keep getting. So it isn't until every single individual who understands that they have a moral compass, knows it, that it is part of them, starts activating it, that this whole system starts collapsing. And moral compass doesn't mean you start using their systems against them. It means that you withdraw your consent by calling out their systems. And imagine doing that on a mass scale, what would happen, right? There would be no one to run their structures for them at all. So the whole thing just falls over. It's that level of awareness that's required. And like you said, if you don't use your brain and your, capacity to actually discern reality for how it is, they'll keep doing this to you because you're part of it. You're collaborating with it. That's what's required, is you stop doing it. All right, so now we're going to look at some of the people, sadly, who are part of the reason why we're still enslaved, whilst they believe they're free. So a real easy way to spot the enslaved mind that's calling themselves free is just have a look at what they post on social media. So, for example, have a look at this one. Pope Charles and Elton, they're going to be next. That's a classic giveaway. Or posts like this that you see, it says exactly what's happening behind the scenes, needs to be done with delicate surgical precision. And then this guy who's actually one of the ghouls, he used to be a Secret Service operative, so right in the inner sanctum. What are the chances he's going to have anything to do with your liberty or pushing you back into the pen from which he wants you to stay in, right? And what does he say? Just because you don't immediately see it doesn't mean it isn't happening. So what are they relying on? Your blind belief. So more coaching you to believe in things that don't exist but require faith, like that's a virtue, right? It's playing on that. And these people have been running this for years, right? Like, I don't even remember how long this has been going. And yet, significantly at the principal level, how much control do you have back in your life? So what they're doing is just extending you to keep that faith. Yet, what's really changed in your life that's showing you that there is anything significant changing? There never is going to be, because it requires you to take action. And their job is to keep you docile, believing that someone is going to do it in your name. So then you keep accepting whatever comes your way because you're going to believe that there's a happy ending at the end of it. So it's using that fairy tale storyline that you were impregnated with as a child that was part of your programming that very few people actually recognize. So let's see what other kind of posts you'll know are part of that whole illusion and are being shared by people who believe they're actual freedom fighters and pro-freedom. And then you've got this kind of stuff, right? These kind of posts, like that Department of Governmental Efficiency, right? But then have a look at some of the things that are written here. Like, you scroll down, you'll see his executive order is written to block legal challenges, including language that overrides conflicting executive orders, orders every agency, etc. Right? So what is that telling you? It's telling you that this is about someone who has the power to make commands. So who would believe in such a structure where that's all right? Like, do you as an individual have the power to make commands and force people to do what your commands are? Or is that actually defined as violence? So if it's defined as violence at the individual level, being that this man is an individual, how can it not be violence when other people take that as a source of authority, that they're now entitled and virtuous for committing violence against others by enforcing a command? Like, at the principal level, if you don't understand that, then you are enslaved. That's what's truly here to be learnt about how you can see this is all one big drama that's been played out, like Bill Cooper says, for your benefit, for you to stay stuck in the illusion that these people are necessary for you, and this structure, more so than the people, are necessary for you to be able to actually live cohesively in some way. And all we need to do is find the right master, right? We just haven't had the right master. It's the idea that there is a master. That's the problem. And what I've noticed is the majority of people who fall for this hoax and that are still falling for it today, they come from a mindset where there's a belief in a superior being, a superior creator being, that's the ultimate judger. That's this cosmic overlord or cosmic monarch that has no sense of humor, but what they do is they actually keep a logbook of all your deeds, and then they will assess, the quality of your deeds, that they get the power to do that, right? So once you believe that mindset, then you will give over to men like this guy, Trump, who, what do? They actually make it out like he's a gift from God, like he's some kind of, super being. Like, that's the story that's been fed, and how many people keep swallowing it up. Why? Because they've had to have bought into the idea that there is such a thing as a supreme judger who has the ultimate say over what happens, because they created the world and they created it based on, this idea that they are the ultimate authority. Once you believe that, these ideas of putting that same ideology into a human being are the next natural step. And so, sadly, these people who are mostly Christian in the United States and in Australia and in any other country that follow this kind of stuff and share it out, you can pretty much bet that you can trace them back to buying into that idea that that's an actual truth, right? So they have some version of this book called the Bible that they've taken in as an actual verified fact, and that the true nature of reality is there must be someone sitting on the throne. And once you buy into that, that's how you are controlled and made a good slave. So we're going to look deeper into some more aspects just to add more weight to how this has any relevance to reality. So one of the critical factors that hasn't been covered in any of the commentary I've seen to date in this whole tariff hoax, I guess, this manufactured disaster, this anxiety trip, is the understanding about manufacturing and how there's been a controlled demolition over the course of time. Now, what you need to understand, if we go by what Bill says, is this is all organized from a central force, right? And they have their levels of managers that play their parts. And they insert them into critical positions to act it out, right? So we're basically talking about a satanic cult, right? And so capitalism comes from that cult, right? It's an ideology where there's a superior and an inferior. That's essentially what it comes down to, because without the belief that there is such a thing as an inferior breed of being, there would be no impulse to wish to subjugate them and make them labor for you, because that's all they're good for. That has to be a belief that cannot be verified in reality. Like, that's the first thing to understand. As soon as you claim someone's labor and that you have the right to decide what happens with the products of their labor, then that's an imbalance, right? And therefore, we're running some kind of evil structure that's antithetical to the natural flow of how life has been created to work. So what needs to be really factored in here is that controlled demolition of manufacturing of, let's call them the West, countries, that believe that they're some kind of democracy, is that it's been outsourced to places where labor is cheap because they don't have government coercion to control and cause harm and damage and destruction to those who defy their dictates, right? So the thing that's misunderstood about capitalism is that it needs a state to enforce itself. It's impossible to have capitalism happen without some kind of organized force to make sure people are controlled and dominated and herded, through coercion and violence. So people who believe that capitalism can exist without a state are either lying to themselves or just bold-faced lying, one or the other. The two are totally reliant on one another. So, like I said, it's all organized from the same place, right? But it's made to look like, the government's necessary to protect you from these big bad capitalists when they're all the same people, right? So that's another game they're playing to make it look like there's a division here, but they're not. Because essentially, have a look at how much freedom you really have in an employment situation, right? If you're really honest with yourself, you don't get that much, right? And how much protection do you really have? You don't get that much, right? So it's not in the interest of masters to actually get in the way of other masters. That doesn't work like that. So the whole understanding of how, this has come about, it's all got to do with that capitalist psychopathy that seeks profit as its highest aspiration, right? So once you're in that mindset, you're going to go where it's cheaper. That's just how it works. And so instead of slave plantations being self-reliant, where they actually not only extract the minerals and the resources they need to create the products that are going to benefit the lifestyles the slaves have been nudged into believing they want, they outsource it to places where it's cheaper. So no longer can you be self-reliant. So now you are reliant on these countries, slave plantations is a better word for it, where they don't have those enforcements, right? Where people are held to account. Well, they're not really, but at least they show this veneer of it. And so therefore, the whole structure is made sure that we were living in a place of complacency here in let's call it the West, and we thought we had it better than everyone else, but we were being set up the whole time. And that's what's going to be very hard for a great number of people to really understand, that they were so drunk on, being the better system, that they never realized that they were being set up. And so that's a critical piece to understand. Now, if you have a slave plantation that's well armed and you've been trying to disarm them for years, like what the USA is, through various ways, and you're failing, right? What better way to destroy them from the inside, where you don't need to, take their weapons away? You just take away their capacity to actually provide for themselves by making it so expensive for them to get the goods they need, because they don't produce them themselves. They've got to import them. So a tariff is not a tax on the foreign slave masters. It's a tax on your own slaves. If they can't afford to buy the things they need, well, how are they going to sustain the quality of life they require to be able to defend themselves? So it's just something worth considering. If you've got a whole range of measures that your slave masters are wanting to impose, and there's an impediment, well, instead of fighting them directly, where there's going to be high losses, right, and you don't want to risk that, how about you just take their means away in a way that they're not going to spot? Because if you threaten a population of slaves with invasion from a foreign-looking slave master like China, which is what you'll hear a lot about, they're going to arc up and fight to the death, right? Because they don't recognize these slave masters. They're happy with theirs, right? Because they look like them. So that's a really important thing to understand too. Now, Larkin Rose does a lot of really good work on that, so I highly recommend you looking him up. I will show you some videos to look at that are worth investing to understand this principle. Okay, so before I go ahead with the content I was about to show you, I just chose to inject this quote, as to me it's quite pertinent to what's really at play here. So here we go. When you want to help people, you tell them the truth. When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. So I love that quote because it's self-evident. Have a look at how many people have fallen for that Trump narrative that he's the white hat savior, the leader of the white hats. He's a 5D chess player sent by God, to save humanity from itself, right? It's like the incarnation of the Jesus story repeated, and how popular that is, right? Go have a look at the numbers that have fallen for it, left, right, and center. Then you'll see the numbers of some of the resources I'm going to show you. You'll see, especially when I show you the cover image of Larkin's video, which I'm not going to play. I'm just going to show the cover image, and you can look at it yourself if you want to. You'll see how many numbers come and watch his stuff, right? Because there's a very small number of people who are willing to actually go introspective and reflect on how they are susceptible to falling for the seduction of lies. There's only a small number that are willing to do that. The overwhelming majority are still stuck in that paradigm where the problem rests outside themselves and it's someone else's fault, and also that they need to have a savior to rescue them because they themselves aren't enough as they are. So just thought I'd throw that in before I carry on. Okay, I can see that this video has gone way longer than I was hoping, so I'm going to end it here, and I'm going to continue with the rest of the content that I had in mind in a part 2. So make sure you stick around for that one when it comes out and watch it, because it's got a lot of detail that I'm missing in this one that's critical to understand the big picture. So in the meantime, you can go to magnacarta1215.com. There you'll have lots of resources. For example, you've got an action tab where if you're ready to take action, there's plenty of campaigns that you can get involved in. So I highly recommend that. You've got a bunch of learning to do if you're someone who's into learning and really solidifying knowledge based on self-evident truths. You've got memes you can share out. There's social proof. There's communities that are starting to come together online, so you can find out where they are. Ton of stuff. So highly recommend you go there. And stick around and wait for part 2 when it comes out.